everybody. I'm so glad everybody could join us tonight for the first ever adult transition panel discussion with these wonderful panel of experts that actually was able to join us all tonight. It's kind of a miracle almost to have everybody on here representing different areas of ways that we can prepare to transition from student to adult life. And I want to introduce myself, and I'm Deb Freed with Adult Independent Services. And my partner, Jacob Hackett, is up there in the corner. Well, my corner it is. And he's been doing a lot of work with me and helping individuals really prepare for transitioning from student to adult life. And I work with a number of schools in the area, as well as other organizations, and as well as just some private clients and families and a whole bunch of people, because I'm also a parent of a daughter who's 27 years old, who's developmentally and intellectually disabled. So I know it's very challenging when we're trying to really maneuver and pave the way through once a child or our loved one goes through high school and ages out of the system. You know, you kind of fall off that disability cliff, and it gets very, very scary and overwhelming to try and figure out what's going to happen to our loved ones once they age out of school. And that's why I'm really happy that this panel is here together. And I really would like to, Jacob, would you like to introduce yourself? You're on mute.
Here we go. Hi everyone, I'm Jacob Hackett. I'm a self-advocate for children with different abilities, and it's funny. Deborah and I were just together. As she said, she and I do a few of the schools together. We were just at Atlantic County Special Services today, and it still amazes me how many. I mean, we have very good parents that are on the ball, but like when I first got there today, Deb was telling me about a parent that had no idea about guardianship and things. So I'm really happy this panel is together to hopefully share some information for some parents. Thank you for having me, Deb.
Of course. And once again, so that's what we kind of do. Our goal is to really create the team for families once their children's age out, for when they go from their team that they had within the high school to the team that they're going to have into their adult life. And I'm so glad Jacob brought up guardianship, because the first person I'd like to introduce today is a wonderful woman, a wonderful attorney that really helps and assists all of my families with the differences between power of attorney and guardianship. And her name is Stacy Torres, and she's an attorney. And I'm going to give the actual microphone or speaker to Stacy so she can introduce herself and kind of share with how she really assists families.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Torres. As Deb mentioned, I'm an attorney. I practice currently in New Jersey and Maryland, and I actually assist Deb a lot in preparing families for guardianship and preparing a lot of different testamentary and estate planning documents like powers of attorney, medical powers of attorney, trusts, wills, guardianships, of course, and other estate planning documents. And tonight, my focus is going to be on special needs and supplemental needs trusts, as well as guardianship applications. So I'm just going to jump right in. A lot of people have a lot of questions with regards to, excuse the noise in the background, it's my dog. A lot of people have a lot of questions sometimes with regards to money for their relative, be it a child, be it a spouse, a sibling, or a grandchild who may have disabilities. And a lot of times the resolution for these income issues is what's called a supplemental needs trust. A lot of people refer to a supplemental needs trust as a special needs trust. There is a slight difference, and I'm going to explain a little bit of those differences this evening, starting with the supplemental needs trust. The supplemental needs trust is the most commonly used trust between families who have family members with disabilities. This is most commonly used when if mom and dad have a child who is disabled and receives government assistance. That could be social security income, it could be Medicaid, it could be food stamps, Section 8. The supplemental needs trust is a third-party trust for the benefit of that disabled person. So let's start with, what is a trust and what does it do? A trust is essentially a separate holdings for someone who has disabilities and who is unable to earn their own income, so to speak, so that they remain eligible to receive their government assistance. So you can think of the special needs trust sort of as a third person almost, some imaginary person who's holding on to some additional funds for the benefit of that of the disabled person. You would deposit any additional income. Let's say if they earn an inheritance, if they have some money that their grandparents just give them on a monthly basis, if they have some sort of personal allowance that exceeds the amount of their rent, their food needs, their medical supplies, all of these amounts in surplus can be deposited into the special needs trust. So how does the trust operate? It's a bank account. It has its own tax ID number, and the bank account is effectively called or under the name of that person's supplemental needs trust. That will be, you'll see it on your bank statement. You'll see it when you go to your banking app. The name under the account will literally be the name of that person, supplemental needs trust. From there, you can use those funds for anything that the disabled person might need. It could be medical costs, medical bills, prescription costs. It could be food. It could be supplemental rent. It could also be, and I get this question a lot, it could be something like a vacation. It could be something like a car, transportation, Uber, a cab, a bus. It can be all of those things so long as they are for the benefit of the disabled person or child. So you would create a supplemental needs trust just for that purpose, so that the disabled person that you are supporting doesn't lose those benefits. Obviously, Social Security, Medicaid, those are government benefits that are based on that person's income. So a supplemental needs trust is exempted from the disabled person's income overall. It's not considered direct income to that person. Why? One, because it's not in their name. It's in the name of the trust. So to the extent that they receive that money, they're not receiving it as income. It is just to pay for expenses that are for their benefit. If you are a grandparent who is caring for someone who is disabled and you want to establish a special needs trust, the rules are a little bit different for grandparents in that at the end of a disabled person's life, some of, or most, if not all, of the remaining funds that are in that special needs trust sometimes need to be paid back to the state for whatever benefits were paid out to that disabled person from SSI, from Medicaid, from food stamps, etc. For both supplemental and special needs trusts, the beneficiary needs to be under 65 years old, and the trust can be created at any point during this time. And for a supplemental needs trust, a lot of the times I get the question, well, do I need to notify Social Security or do I need to notify Medicaid that they have this trust account? And the short answer is no, you don't. There can be instances where sometimes Social Security will ask to see the document just to verify that they're exempted, that the trust fund is exempted as income, which is fine. It doesn't mean that they're going to reduce your benefits. It doesn't mean that they're going to take the benefits away. They just want to make sure that the supplemental trust is written in a way that allows those funds to be exempted from personal income. However, if you're a grandparent and you have a special needs trust for the benefit of a grandchild, or if you're an aunt or uncle that has guardianship over a niece or nephew and you've created a special needs trust, you do have to notify Social Security and Medicare that they do have a special needs account or trust account. And in that event, they will take note of the funds that are available to the disabled person. And sometimes it can affect their assistance. It's all dependent on a case-by-case basis. So if you do have these issues as a grandparent or as a distant relative who's taking care of a disabled person, please make sure to reach out to your attorney or a special an estate planning attorney that can explain these details to you a lot further, because there are a lot of moving parts, and this is why a lot of people get confused with special needs trust and supplemental needs trust. And the difference is very slight and can be confused very easily. So it's important to have an attorney guide you through this process to explain it to you fully. I just touched on the tip of the iceberg when it comes to supplemental and special needs trust. So it's very important that if you do want to establish these accounts for the benefit of a disabled person, that you reach out to an estate planning attorney who can help you and who can explain to you the consequences and benefits also of having these trust accounts for your loved ones. So I'm going to go into another key topic that I touched on, and that's guardianship and testamentary documents. So in talking about children who are disabled children who are transitioning into adulthood and therefore transitioning into different services other than school, so a lot of the times a guardianship application can be the best and the biggest benefit for families. And that is because it will set you on the path for DDD benefits planning, Department of Disabilities, Developmental Disabilities Planning, where your loved one, the disabled person, becomes eligible for DDD benefits. A guardianship application, there are two types of guardianship. There is a limited guardianship and there is a general guardianship. A limited guardianship, think of Wendy Williams, Britney Spears. It's the financial conservatorship. You only have direct abilities to I'm losing my words. You only have the ability to manage a disabled person's financial affairs, and you don't have the ability to manage their day-to-day affairs. Compare that to a general guardianship where you have guardianship over the person and also over the estate. What does a general guardianship do? It does essentially the same thing that a power of attorney would do, where a power of attorney allows you to manage financial aspects of a disabled person's affairs. The guardianship over person and estate allows you to manage medical affairs, financial transactions, If a disabled person who you have guardianship over receives an inheritance, whether it be a monetary inheritance or a property inheritance, a guardianship would allow you to manage those affairs and those assets for the benefit of the disabled person without needing an actual document to direct, to be able to direct you to have permission to do that. So what do you need to start a guardianship application? First, you should, if you have a teenager with disabilities, you should start thinking about preparing a guardianship application at least 6 months before their 18th birthday. This is the earliest that the court will allow you to submit your guardianship application. And it's purposely done in that manner because usually guardianship applications can take between 3 to 6 months to be fully adjudicated in the courts. It all depends on the specific county that you're in, the court system, how quickly they move, how backed up they are. But generally, guardianship applications can take 3 to 6 months from start to finish. Some things that you need to have prepared for your application. You need to be aware of the disabled person's assets and finances. Do they receive government assistance? Do they have money in a bank account? Do they work? Do they have their own income? All of those financial aspects are asked of you by the court so that the court has an idea of what assets you will be managing on behalf of the disabled person. And it also helps the court keep track of how you are distributing those assets to the disabled person. You can also have an IEP submitted along with your guardianship application to show that the disabled person is actually being supported through assistance in school, and that the program identifies that person, the disabled person's disabilities, and the necessity for them to have an IEP and a special curriculum to support their functions on a day-to-day basis. And then the most important portion of the guardianship application is a doctor's or psychiatrist certification. We have Dr. Kelly on the Zoom who will speak more about doctor certifications and evaluations for disabled children for support of their guardianship applications. But those are really the top 3 documents that you want to have to support your guardianship application so that the court properly approves your guardianship application. The problem sometimes can be when you don't have the appropriate documentation, it can lead the court to deny your application and subsequently assume that the disabled person that you are caring for may not need your guardianship and may not need you to manage their day-to-day affairs and maybe even their financial affairs, because they may have the perception that the disabled person can manage these aspects on their own. So it's important that your doctor or your psychiatrist understands the purpose of their certification and that they understand their role in assisting you and providing you with the appropriate documentation for the disabled person's diagnoses, so that the court can also understand why it's important for you to obtain guardianship over the disabled person. A guardianship application is indefinite. It doesn't have an expiration. There is no time limit on how long your guardianship lasts. It goes on perpetually for the life of the disabled person. Some requirements that the court has during your guardianship could be you may be required to provide asset information to the court on a yearly basis, again, so they can keep track of the assets of the disabled person that you're managing. And also just to make sure that there's no misappropriation of that disabled person's assets or funds, and that they're going to the right place. And if you're buying vacations, you're taking them on the vacations too, and not just for yourself. Also involved in the guardianship application, there is what I like to call a vetting process. The court requires that there is a third-party attorney involved in the guardianship application, and that is so that that third party is a neutral party who is there for the benefit of that disabled person, so that the court understands that the applicants for the guardianship application can actually be approved to be guardians, and they are the appropriate persons to be approved for guardianship. Sometimes this is an additional cost if there is a private attorney that's involved. There's also the option for a public attorney. Usually the public defender's office is involved. It's just a matter of requesting that from the court. Unfortunately, sometimes when a public defender is involved, it does cause the application to take a little bit longer. But be sure to speak with your attorney to see which option works best for you and your family in your guardianship application. And then finally, I just want to touch very quickly on power of attorney documents. So these are very common documents that a lot of people use, even outside of using them with people with disabilities. You may use one for your parents if they're elderly and you want to help them with their finances. The same rules apply in this scenario where if you unfortunately are not granted a guardianship, your next step would probably be a power of attorney document so that you have the ability to access your child or your loved one's medical records, their financial accounts, their bank accounts, their pay stubs or things like that if they're working part-time. I have a lot of parents who are concerned specifically with doctor's visits, and once their children turn 18, they're no longer allowed to consult with their child's doctor because they don't have a power of attorney document. Be sure that if you are requesting a power of attorney to be drafted by your family attorney, that they include the provision or give you a separate medical power of attorney so that you have the ability to review and receive your child's medical records. A lot of times power of attorney documents are so standard that they only involve financial transactions and they don't involve that small aspect of medical records. And it's really important, and I'm sure Dr. Kelly will back me up on this. It's really important to have that provision in there that your child has granted you the ability to review their medical documents and speak with and consult with their doctors after they have already turned 18. Sometimes the pitfalls with power of attorney documents are that they can be challenged. If you have a child with disabilities who still understands normal day-to-day functioning and you can explain to them what this document is for, you have to make sure that they understand the purpose of it, because sometimes I have, of course, in practical life, not all parents get along. Sometimes we have one parent who chooses to be a power of attorney over the other parent, and the other parent who has been left out of this decision challenges the power of attorney document, and that presents an issue that can be presented before a court, and a power of attorney document can be invalidated. So just make sure that you're consulting with your attorney if you have some of these issues present in your family dynamic, so that they can properly prepare you and properly prepare your documents so that you don't have to go through this and you're not spending extra money on attorney services and document drafting and the like. But for the most part, for both guardianship and power of attorney, both parents can serve as guardians and principals for these documents.
Hey, Stace, I'm just gonna interrupt for one second. I just wanted to thank you for everything. I just was checking on the time.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going
No,
over.
that's okay. I'm just checking on the time, but it was really thorough, and I really want to thank you for all that great information. I just wanted to interrupt for 1 second because I know that we have a lot of participants on this evening, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. but I just want to make sure that everybody, can you please leave your contact information in the chat room? Because we'd like to be able to reach out to you individually, particularly if you have a question for one of these experts. We'll be able to provide you with their contact information as well. This way, at least you can contact one of these experts directly. But I just want to give Dr. Hartigan, an introduction too, because I know you alluded to her because she's an expert in psychological and other evaluations from Growing Tree Psychological practice. So I just want to thank Dr. Hartigan, for being on. So I just want to give her a chance to get some words in too. But Stacy, thank you for everything. And the floor is yours, Dr. Hartigan.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Like Deb said, I'm a licensed psychologist in New Jersey. I have a private practice based out of Summers Point. We also have a satellite office in Marlton. I chose to talk tonight about just a small piece of what's important that we do as psychologists, and that's evaluations. And like Stacy was referring to, sometimes if you don't have the right documentation, you're not going to get too far, because you have to be able to show that you have a documented developmental disability and what that is. If it's okay, I have a couple of slides I made that I thought might be able to help us a little bit. Okay. Okay, can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, what is the importance of a psychological evaluation? The main reason you need an evaluation is just to show you're eligible. You need documentation of like I said, a developmental disability for services through DDD, DVR, SSI, and other services like Stacy was just talking about, something as simple as guardianship. You need to be able to show in a psych eval the reason that you need the guardianship. Is that because you have a person has a low IQ? Is it because they have low adaptive skills? Is it because they have certain diagnoses? What is that reason? So again, the psych eval is so important because it provides your medical documentation. So if you look on the DDD website, that's like one of the first things that they talk about, is making sure that you have your medical documentation. So what does a psych eval look like if you come to someone like me? I'll start by saying it's different for everybody, because everybody comes with something different. Typically, a psych eval is going to look at, most of your areas of development, which include cognitive functioning, your emotionals, your adaptive skills, your behavior, socialization, sensory needs. The other thing that we look at and evaluate is, are there any specific diagnostic questions? For instance, do I have ADHD? Do I have anxiety disorder? Do I have depression? Or do I have autism? Those are some of added diagnostic questions that typically come. Another really important factor that we look at as psychologists is, what is the question of the testing, or what are you using the report for? And I'll give you an example. I have some people that come to me and say, I think I have autism and I was never diagnosed. And I just want to know. I don't want to use it for anything. I'm functioning, I'm working, I'm doing quite well, but I need to know. So that evaluation might look a little different than someone who comes and says, I think I have autism, I'm really struggling at work, I can't keep a job, I think I have ADHD. So that evaluation might be a little bit more detailed, because it's going to go to different services in order for the person to have medical documentation. Okay, I'm going to give an example, because I think this might help a little bit, because everybody always says, like, why does an evaluation take so long? Or why, I come in for so many hours and then I have to wait a couple of months for the final report, etc. I'm going to give you a typical example of some people that we might see at our practice. A 32-year-old male who was diagnosed with something like ADHD as a child comes and says, hey, I'm wondering if I'm on the autism spectrum. And then we ask some more questions and they tell us they're having trouble holding a job. They've had multiple jobs over the last couple of years. They also said they struggled in school and math, but was never diagnosed with any issues. They're looking to apply for services through DDD. And then they inform us that their last evaluation was probably in 8th grade, and they really didn't have much documentation of anything. So then we're going to ask, okay, so this person's looking to go to DDD. So what does DDD look for? They're saying, does this individual have a documented intellectual or developmental disability? So from there, what we would do as psychologists is make an evaluation plan for this person. And I put that down on the bottom. I'm not going to go into specifics of the tests, but just to give you an idea, I mean, these are common tests that most psychologists would use if we were looking to do a similar evaluation. We typically look at IQ. We would add an achievement test if they have a specific concern about learning in a certain area. There's an autism test. There's scales for measuring attention and hyperactivity and executive functioning. And then we always look at adaptive behavior skills. In addition to interviews, observations, and those things, reviewing of records, which all takes time added into the report. All right. My last slide is some typical questions that I get all the time. How long does an eval take? Again, it depends on the individual person and what questions we're looking to answer. I'm going to say at a minimal, and a psych eval would be 5 hours. It could take multiple hours, usually multiple visits. Some of the tests that you give, especially the IQ, could be long and not stressful, but it takes some brain power. And a question a lot of people ask all the time, what does it cost? I'm going to give you an average figure, about $350 an hour for testing. And again, that depends on what your proposed evaluation plan is. Is it covered on health insurance? I wish I could say yes to that question, but sometimes it isn't. Really depends on what plan you have. Some insurance companies will require a pre-authorization for testing. Some other insurance companies will say it will be covered, but it would be at a percentage. And then there's other companies who don't cover testing at all. So that's an individual basis, and I'd give more information on how you would have to look into that if you were interested in an evaluation. Who can do a psych eval that includes a diagnosis? Usually it's just a licensed psychologist who can do that. School psychologists can do some of the testing, like such as the IQ test, the adaptive testing, but school psychologists are not able to provide a diagnosis. And then what happens after you get this great evaluation? You're going to end up with a report which has some recommendations in it. The report will obviously satisfy your medical documentation you need for a lot of these services. And from there, I put in my email at the bottom. If you have any specific questions, I would be happy to do my best in answering them for you. And thank you for inviting me. I'm going to move on and pass it over to Rachel Smith, who is the manager of supported employment at Easter Seals.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I also have a PowerPoint here to share. Hi, everybody. I am Rachel from Easter Seals, and I manage our supported employment department in the Southern region. I'm going to share this here. So a little bit of an overview of Easter Seals. Our mission is to enrich the lives of people with disabilities and special needs and those who care about them by providing opportunities to live, learn, work, and play in their communities. We have a lot of different services all over the state of New Jersey. In the southern region, all the numbers here are explained on our map code on our website. So I'll link that in the chat after the presentation, so you can understand a little bit about what is offered in each county. In the southern region, primarily, we have employment services via supported employment, and we also have extended employment center in Cumberland County. We have a day program in Northfield and a day hab without walls, which is essentially a community inclusion type program. Some of those services are for the transition age. Some of them are for older, over 18 age. But we have a lot of different services. So I'll link the chat so you can look at that later. The main thing I want to focus on tonight is the pre-employment transition services and supported employment. So we are an agency that is connected with the Division of Vocational Rehab Services, DVRS, and the local office for Atlanta County is in Pleasantville. There's also an office in Cape May County and Rio Grande. The Cumberland County office is in Bridgeton, and the Gloucester County office is in Sewell. All of those are listed on the DVR website, which is linked at the bottom. And again, I'll put that in the chat after I finish the presentation for you to check out. I definitely would encourage you to look at DVR's website just to see all the different services that they offer. So I'm talking about a very few services tonight and just kind of overview of what they offer, but there really are a ton of different things that DVR can do for you if you meet with a intake, a VRC, and have an intake and get to better understand what is available. So to get started with Easter Seals, everyone comes through the Division of Vocational Rehab first. So the step would be to go to the local DVRS office. I'd encourage you to call ahead of time so you can set up an appointment with a VRC. There are different VRCs or vocational rehab counselors assigned to different schools. So if, depending on what school your child or student is attending, they'll be set up to meet with a certain counselor at the local office. From there, you'll have an intake, the student will have an intake, and the DVR counselor will explain the different services that are available to that student, as well as what agencies they can select from. So Easter Seals is one vendor or one agency, but there are a lot of different agencies, and they'll give you the options and kind of explain to you, what's available in your area, and you can make a, informed choice which agency to work with. So if you are selecting Easter Seals as your vendor, DVR will send your information to us, and then we will reach out to you to schedule the intake, and then you'll be assigned an employment specialist. So depending on what service you receive, the next steps look a little bit different, but that's the beginning process for everybody. And like Dr. Hargadon was explaining, it helps to have all of that disability documentation ahead of time when you go to DVR, because that's one of the first things that they're going to ask for is that disability documentation in order to get approved for services. So that part is really important. One service that we offer is called Pre-Employment Transition Services, or Pre-ETS. So this is for students ages 14 up through 21, and there's 5 core activities. So depending on the needs of the student, DVR will decide whether to give all 5 of these services to the student, or to give 1 or 2 or 3, kind of depending on what the needs are. And each one will go up to 25 hours. So we might get 10 hours of job exploration time, and we might get 20 hours of work-based learning. It's really specific to the student and what their needs are. So just to give you a little overview, job exploration is basically just kind of understanding what's available. So what are the current labor trends? What's in demand right now in the area? There's some assessments that we do to understand what the students' skills are and their strengths are, and how to prepare them for the workforce. Work-based learning experience is more of an immersive work experience. So sometimes that's called job sampling, where we would reach out to local community businesses, or whatever the student's interested in pursuing, that's the direction that we're going to go. So the picture on the screen here is an Amazon warehouse where our staff took students to Amazon to explore careers, what it's like to work at Amazon. Sometimes that includes informational interviews, where we'll set up time for if a student is interested in teaching, maybe we'll connect with a teacher and sit down and have a little interview about what it's like to be a teacher, a day in the life. There's so many different things we could do, and this is just, again, like the tip of the iceberg, but that's work-based learning. We also provide counseling and guidance for post-secondary opportunities. So we'll discuss, where do you want to go after you finish high school? Are you interested in trade school? Are you interested in college? Do you have no interest in secondary schooling? That's okay, too. But we want to just educate the families, educate the students and their parents and guardians about what's available, how to do the FAFSA to apply for student aid, what colleges are in the area, what programs they have, what the cost is, just give a little bit of an education on that process and what that could look like. The fourth area is work readiness training. So this is where we really prepare the students for the workforce. We'll talk about, interactions with coworkers, how to advocate for yourself in the workplace. We'll talk about interview skills, what to wear for an interview, how to present yourself, body language, what is minimum wage, what are your rights as an employee. We'll kind of go over that, which also rolls into self-advocacy, which is really understanding in a deeper level how to advocate for themselves. And that even includes how to advocate in the IEP meetings, how to understand your rights and your responsibilities and what you're interested in, or how you need to advocate for yourself in those group meetings, how to advocate for yourself as an employee, what are workplace accommodations, what are your rights under the ADA. We really go as deep as we need to in each of these areas to make sure that the students understand what their needs are and what their rights are. So currently we're offering supports for pre-employment transition services in Atlantic, Cumberland, Mercer, Middlesex, Morris, and Somerset, and working on adding more counties to that list. So this is a program we're really excited about and looking forward to expanding into the pre-ETS services. We also have traditional supported employment. So if a student is out of school, or if they're at that 20 to 21 age where you're worried about starting pre-ETS because they're about to graduate this year and they want to make sure that you still have support set up, it can roll right into our supported employment program. Also, if you don't do pre-ETS, you can choose supported employment instead if you talk to DVR about which one would be best for you and your student. And this is more about really getting into work. So we do still do job readiness services like interview skills, interview prep, but we're really here working on building the resume, completing job applications, how to write a cover letter, how to follow up on jobs, in-person follow-ups versus phone call follow-ups, more of the active job search process for pre-placement. After that is our intensive services. So in that process, we are with the student or client every step of the way. So we're doing onboarding paperwork with them. We're helping them with their orientation and on the job trainings, making sure that they understand all the responsibilities of their role. That's a big, area sometimes that can get kind of tricky, where an employer might assume that you know what you're supposed to do without explicitly saying it to you. And then that leads to correctional actions when the student didn't, or employee didn't even know that that was something they were supposed to be doing. So we're there to kind of bridge the gap between the employer and the employee and make sure that they know what their responsibilities are and that they're doing those to the best of their ability. We want to make sure that they're confident in their new role and that they are developing relationships and natural supports with their coworkers that are there to create an inclusive environment. We want to make sure they have supports that they need and that they feel confident to do their job on their own without us present. Eventually, these services fade out. So we start, a little bit more involved and more support at first. And then the idea is, as time goes on, we fade the supports to allow that employee or student to be more independent, at which point they move into long-term follow-along services. And this is a little bit less intense. Sometimes this is, 3 or 4 hours a month, typically, where we're really just kind of checking in. They've maintained their job past the 90-day mark. The manager satisfied, the employee satisfied with the placement. We can do on-site visits. We could do off-site visits. We're really there to observe and support. Sometimes things happen down the line. You might have a job for a year and then management changes or your coworkers change, and suddenly it, kind of upsets the process, and you might feel a little bit confused on what your responsibilities are, or there's program changes. So we're there through those changes as well to make sure that the student or employee is comfortable in their role and adaptable. We make sure that they are keeping the job, monitoring the satisfaction of the employer. So That's another big area where sometimes employers don't know how to address concerns. And so rather than kind of having those difficult conversations, they just end up taking corrective actions or terminating employees without really giving them a chance to even notify them that there's an issue and how to correct that. So we're there as the bridge between the employer and the employee to advocate and to help the employee understand where they need to improve. And an important point about long-term follow-along is that it's funded by DVR or DDD, depending on what services you have. So if you have DDD supports already in place, the funding for long-term follow-along would go to DDD. But if you don't have DDD because you didn't qualify or for whatever reason you don't have it set up, it can be funded through DVR. So that's a nice, available option to you as well. I've linked the SE webpage, support employment webpage here as well. And I'll share that in the chat. And I think Deb might be sharing the PowerPoint afterwards as well, so that you have this information. So that's there. Okay, and from here, I'm going to turn this over to Nicole Valley from DDD. She's the Transition and Employment Specialist.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen. And I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. I know this is a lot of information, but we really feel that it's going to be helpful to you. And if you have any questions at all about my portion of the presentation, I have included my email in the chat. I am going to move through the slides a little bit faster than I usually do, just for the sake of time, but I just want to let you know if you have any questions at all about the material that I cover, you can reach out to me at any time and I'm happy to help answer your questions. So I'm going to give you a snapshot look at navigating our service system. So this is our mission statement. We want to assure the opportunity for everyone with developmental disabilities to receive quality services and supports, participate meaningfully in their communities, and exercise their right to make choices, which we all want those choices and the ability to make the right choices for ourselves and for our loved ones. We operate on a Medicaid-based fee-for-service system. This means that there are standardized rates for services, and for every dollar that the state of New Jersey spends on services, the federal government will match that amount. So this provides you and your loved ones increased flexibility, choice, and again, the quality of those choices once they come into our service system. There is federal funding for home and community-based services and supports for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Everyone who comes into our service system must be Medicaid eligible, and this is really important. They have to maintain that eligibility throughout the time they utilize our services. Individuals come into our system on one of two programs. So there's one Medicaid waiver and two programs, and they are the Community Care Program, CCP, which is for those who may need a higher level of care, those in nursing homes or group homes. Most service recipients come into our system through the Supports Program, SP. All services are accessed through Medicaid-approved providers, and service planning provided through support coordination agencies, which I will refer to a little bit further in the presentation. So we serve adults at least 21 years of age, those diagnosed with intellectual and developmental disabilities that occurred prior to the age of 22 and are considered lifelong, meet the functional criteria of having a developmental disability, be a resident of New Jersey, and again, eligible for Medicaid. So the preparation to transition into our service system. During this time, this transition period, we do ask that families and school administrators, child study teams, whoever interacts with the service recipient or the future service recipient in this case, asking them to reflect on 7 areas of a person's life that can support planning or success and for that person to have a meaningful, fulfilling life. We call it the recipes. So taking a look at someone's current responsibilities, and maybe they'd like to have more responsibilities as they age. Their education, what they like to study now, a favorite subject. Maybe they want to pursue that on a post-secondary level. Community life, being involved in faith-based organizations, youth groups, and maybe extending that involvement into adulthood. Individuals' health and well-being, which is very important, as we know, mental health, emotional, physical. For me, it's playing music. I'm a music therapist and a musician. I play 5 instruments, and it's something that makes me feel good about myself. So that is the focus of this service system. It's not a one-size-fits-all system. This is a system where we want everyone individually to experience that good life as they become adults. Place to live. They may live, or you may have them live at home with you now, but maybe they'd like their own apartment as they get older. We do have a housing voucher. There's a lot more information about that on DDD's website, which I will share with you. Employment. New Jersey is an employment first state, and as we've heard tonight, employment is the preferred option for those who have disabilities. And it doesn't matter what type of disability you have. Everyone has the right to work, or at least to explore employment. And finally, social life. What does your child like to do for fun now? And how can they expand that social life coming into our service system? Person-centered planning tools. These are things that we like to use, and we like our families to maybe sit down with their children and talk about these things. Life course trajectory is one of them. And this really is taking a look at past experiences and how they can inform our future choices as we move forward. So, for example, if someone lives in a rural area now, it's not really working for them. Maybe they want to live in a more urban setting. So looking at the past and how it can inform our good life in the future. Another one of these tools is the Integrated Support Star, looking at current resources and identifying what might be used as your child moves into adulthood. So briefly at the top, their personal strengths and assets. Those are the things they're good at. On the right, we have relationships. So that could be their relationship with you or a close family friend. Eligibility specific on the bottom right, which would be our services, and then the services of organizations and agencies like the Division of Vocational Rehab Services, which you heard about prior to my part of the presentation. Community-based, which would be those local services that the general public uses. And then finally, technology. So that could be an assistive app that your child has on their phone that maybe makes their day-to-day life a little bit easier. So looking at current resources and then deciding what we might need as you move into the adult service system. And our available services and supports are right here. So this is a list of all of our services and supports. You will notice that, for example, by cognitive rehabilitation, it says SP only. And that means that that particular service and support is only available in the supports program. And just a few below that, you'll see CCP only by Community Transition Services. And that means that that service is only available in the CCP program. There's a lot more details about all of these services and supports on our website in both our supports program manual and our community care program manual. And specifically in both manuals, it would be section 17. So the steps to access services. And right now you're in that transition process. We do encourage families, if their child can stay in school until 21, that they do so and invoke that educational entitlement. But if they are going to graduate at 18, we strongly suggest that you have a firm plan in place of what those intervening 3 years are going to look like. Now, recently there has been an age change. So there are 2 exceptions now to the 21 and older rule, and they are if someone is involved in competitive integrated employment, or if someone plans on attending a post-secondary school or a trade school that isn't already funded by our division. I can make the age change policy available to you. If you send me an email, I'd be happy to send you a PDF of that age change policy and answer any questions that you may have. So again, 14 to 21, those transition planning years, taking a look at skills and preferences with the recipes acronym we talked about. Those person-centered planning tools, life course trajectory, integrated support star, building the skills now needed to achieve adulthood goals. You suggest that you take a look at something called Planning for Adult Life. It's something that DDD sponsors, and it is run by the ARC of New Jersey. It offers webinars, student parent groups, and all of their webinars are archived on their website for your convenience. And the address is there at the bottom of the screen, planningforadultlife.org. So this is really important. This is the graduate timeline, and this offers a look at all 4 steps that are needed to enter into the adult service system. Now, it's chronologically based on someone in their final year of eligibility. So a person turning 21 would look at this chronologically, but all of the steps are the same no matter what the age of the person is who's entering into our service system. It offers information about all of our community services offices. That's on the left-hand side of the screen. And then it gives you information based on each step that you need to take. So I would print this out, maybe have it on your refrigerator or on your desk, and have it handy for reference. And here are the 4 steps. First 3 steps are really what determines eligibility: applying for Medicaid, completing our application, moving through the New Jersey Comprehensive Tool, and then finally, step 4 is completing the Support Coordination Agency selection form. I'm going to stop the presentation here for time purposes, but please send me an email if you have any questions at all about the information that I've provided. I know it's a lot, but we are here to help you navigate this process. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody, Nicole. That was awesome. And Dr. Kelly and Rachel and Stacy. And I think it's just, and Jacob. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I do have a special person also on here that I do a lot of work with their organization. I didn't know if he wanted to introduce himself and just pass out maybe where they're located and what they actually do. I see that he just unmuted himself, because how did he guess I was going to call him out?
Well,
I wanted to introduce Donald Campbell for the Atlantic Center for Independent Living. They actually offer a lot of different supports and services through their agency, and all their supports and services are free. So it's kind of nice just to know when you come out of high school, not to mention, everybody else that's on here tonight, which is just, this group is amazing. Like I just have to be everybody that's represented on this here tonight. Like I want to put it in my pocket and just carry this around with me wherever I go, because it's really challenging to get everybody at one place on one call at the same time. So Donald, I wanted to introduce yourself real quick and let everybody what you do. And thank you for joining us as well, because I know that, it's just going on an hour, but I just saw you on there. I just wanted you to be able to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you, Deb. You're the best. So I'm Donald Campbell. I'm the director of the Atlantic Center for Independent Living, Centers for Independent Living. To keep it short, our support, resource, and advocacy centers for people with disabilities. We help people with disabilities apply for DDD, apply for Medicaid, advocate for accommodations, learn life skills, all the wonderful things that we've talked about today. Were no cost. There's a Center for Independent Living in every county, which you can reach out to my center for, or just Google. And we serve all people with disabilities, all ages. We're also mandated to have 51% of our staff and board have a disability. So people work with us, get guidance from people who live with disabilities. I live with cerebral palsy. So there's a lot of peer support that goes on here. We have a lot of peer support groups, a lot of activities, and I always say we are in addition to.
If you're working with some other agency, you can still work with us. If you're working with them, we do a lot of work together, you can still work with us. If you're working with Rachel, she's awesome, you can still work with us. So it's great. Sometimes people with disabilities and people in general need wraparound support and need as much support as they can give. And I always say, at our core, we help fill in the gaps. You'll get a Medicaid application, but maybe you've never seen it before and need help filling it out. Or you get a Social Security application and you need help applying. Those are the things we do. The other thing we do, I just wanted to add, is we do go over information for guardianship alternatives. I know guardianship gets talked about a lot, and I understand why, but there are alternatives to it, such as the supportive decision making and power of attorney, and becoming a payee also. So I just want everybody to know that there are trade-offs to guardianship, and to look into other options as well, because guardianship can also be controversial in the disability community, and I want people to be informed of the trade-offs and the choices that they are making, and we could help review that with you. So thank you so much, Deb, for having me, and I really enjoyed this presentation and learned a lot.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I'm really happy that you were able to jump on this evening and join all of us in our panel of expert talk. I do just want to share one last thing on this note. One of the reasons why I'm very passionate about what I do is I did mention that I do have a 27-year-old daughter who has a developmental and intellectual disability, as well as being medically compromised. And it is very challenging and overwhelming when you wake up one morning and realize that 21 came out of nowhere, and the school now tells you that you're done. It's time to go because there's another class coming in. And when I did this with my daughter almost 10 years ago, I didn't know anybody on this panel that was here tonight. And it's very challenging maneuvering a system, trying to figure out what you need to get done as you're realizing thoughts crossing your mind, staying, oh my God, what are we going to do next? Oh my God, what's going to happen to my daughter now that this door is closed to the school and we have no idea what we're doing right now. And it really, really is important to start preparing, which is one of the reasons, as I mentioned, why I started this company. And I'm really happy that this panel came together. Hopefully we can all meet again and do it again, because I think it was really amazing information. I know it was a lot tonight, but it really is challenging to know that we are not going to live forever. And so we can put everything in place for our loved ones while we're still able to do it. I think really is the key to success, for them to live independently as possible and for them to live their best life. So if anybody has any questions to anybody on this phone call, to any of the panel of experts, I know that everybody had left their emails in the chat room. Jacob, is there anything you'd like to say at the end of this tonight too? If you want to do a send off, it's up to you. You're still muted. But I want to thank you everybody for joining tonight. Jacob, anything?
No, we're good, Deb.
Okay. Well, anybody else want to add anything? But like I said, if there's any questions, please direct them you can email me all your contact information. I can share that out to all of our panel of experts, or you can email everybody directly.
Yeah, I just want to, real quick, Deb, I just want to encourage everybody, if you'd like future notifications for future programming through Adult Independent Services, or if you would like any information from Deborah Freed, please leave your email address in the chat so that we have the ability to contact you later, and that you don't miss any of our notifications on Facebook, and you get the benefit of all of this wonderful information that we all provided this evening.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and a wonderful weekend. And thanks so much for attending. And thank you so much to the panel of experts for being on here tonight. We really appreciate it. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Deb,
Yes.
you're now the host since Nikki logged off.
Okay.
So you can, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a record button.
Not at the bottom of my screen.